Hi guys. Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum assalam. Um, can you guys hear me? Because I don't have my headphones and that's always a problem. So please tell me you can hear me. I'm gonna bring myself down a little bit. Alaikum assalam, Queen of Andals, the Queen of Andals. That's Game of Thrones. Um, I'm not gonna be really talking about J's. I'm mostly gonna be talking about F. Um, I will talk to you about cancellation of student visas. Good, alhamdulillah. Thank you everyone for letting me know you can hear me. So today's live is entitled Student Visa Cancellations. This is in collaboration, alhamdulillah, with CARE National. That's the Council on American Islamic Relations. I did invite them. It says they're unable to join. I don't know why. But this live, alhamdulillah, is in collaboration with CARE National, Council on American Islamic Relations. We're really excited to collab. We've been working on this live for a little bit of a while now to make sure that you guys stay informed about student visa cancellations, travel restrictions, and then protecting your rights in relation to freedom of speech and immigration status on campus. So let's go ahead and jump in. So as many of you are well aware, visa cancellations are increasing for F1 students, especially for those F1 students who are involved in campus activism or protests on campus, particularly related to being pro-Palestine. Surprise, surprise. Now, what we've heard is around 4,700 CVISs have been terminated, and I believe about 600 visas were revoked during this time period since Trump took office. So it's about 3 months now that we've had almost 5,000 CVISs terminated and almost 600 plus F1 visas being revoked. And I'm going to go into how these two are very different things, okay? So just to give you an overview, an F1 visa is the actual, you want to think of it as like your ticket for entry into the US. So the F1 visa is the stamp that's in your passport, and it is issued by the State Department. So that's really important. What's really different from an F1 visa is your actual CVIS. So the CVIS is what dictates your stay once you're in the United States. So think F1 visa, CVIS, two very different things. Your CVIS is actually dictated by your school, and it can be terminated by USCIS or ICE, which is under the Department of Homeland Security. So let's do an overview so that everybody's on the same page and we can use this language as we go through the live. F1 visa, State Department, think embassy, think the beautiful stamp inside of your passport, think ability to enter the US. CVIS, think Department of Homeland Security, think school, think when you're physically in the US already. So those are two very different things. Now we've seen visas being revoked and we've seen CVISs being terminated. Both of these things are happening. And now the question is, what is it that you need to know as an F1 student, whether you have a visa to enter or you're currently here and your CVIS is active? Keep in mind that a visa cancellation or revocation does not mean that you are immediately deportable. Okay. The reason for that is the visa, as I said from the beginning, allows you to come in and out of the United States, but it doesn't dictate how long you can stay here or under what circumstances you can stay here. That is your CVIS. That is your I-94. So, for example, I've had a lot of clients who's called me up freaking out that their F1 visa, they got a notification, they got an email from the embassy saying that their F1 visa was revoked. That does not necessarily mean that their CVIS is terminated. Okay? The reason that's important is because you get an email from the embassy saying that your visa was revoked, and you think that, oh my God, ICE is going to come knocking on my door, I'm going to get arrested. And that's not necessarily the case. So think of those two things as very different. If your visa is revoked, it doesn't mean that your CVIS is terminated. If your CVIS is terminated, it doesn't mean that your visa is revoked. The most important thing is for you to stay informed. This is your life, your education, your dream. So I want you to take ownership of it. If you get that email from the embassy that your visa is revoked, oh, okay, here we go. Um, Here's Care National. Woohoo! If you get that notification that your visa is revoked, you want to check in.
Wa
Assalamualaikum.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Counselor, how are you?
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. How are you? You want to
I'm good.
introduce yourself?
Yes, yes. Hi. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello. Edward Ahmed Mitch. I'm the National Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Happy to be with you today.
Alhamdulillah. So we want to thank CARE again for hosting this live. It's really timely, really important. So Edward, just to catch you up, I was going into the difference between the F1 visa and the CVIS, what the difference is, and the fact that one can be terminated without the other one being impacted. I also just gave like an overview of numbers. So since Trump took office, we've had almost 4,200 CVISs terminated, and we've had about 600 to 700. The number is different depending on where your source is. F1 visas being revoked. So the reason those two numbers are different again is because the visa can be revoked, but the F1 student can still go to school. Did you want to ask
Yeah,
questions,
yeah.
or let me just? Okay, go
Yeah, yeah.
ahead.
So absolutely. So, in terms of what you're seeing, Afi, with your clients, if someone experiences this, it's been canceled online, they're still enrolled, it's very confusing. What's the first step? What's the first thing they should do if they are canceled in this way?
So if you get the email from the embassy, which is what most people are getting, saying that the visa is revoked, you want to immediately call your DSO. This is your designated school official. Your DSO is going to be your best friend. They will be able to tell you if your CVIS is still active or terminated. If it's active, you're good to go. You can still go to school. If it's terminated, you have a 60-day grace period in order to reinstate that CVIS. And that's really important to know.
Now, practically speaking, though, if the government does not want to allow the person to have that valid visa, what are their options at that point? Are we talking legal action? Is it a matter of going to a different school? What are their options at that point?
Yeah, I mean, so it all depends on why it was terminated. So if CVIS is terminated, I've had clients, even in this whole slew of terminations, that it was triggered by some type of alleged criminal activity. So I even had a client who just was speeding. And for those of you in New York, if you're speeding over 40 miles over the speed limit, it's a misdemeanor. So, for example, they get that misdemeanor and then CVIS is terminated. So, really, we need to know why. And then, based on the why, we can either file a reinstatement or change status or get a new I-20 issued from another school. In that particular example, you file a reinstatement with USCIS. It's on Form I-539, and you explain that the charges were dismissed or, they were done away with. You paid the fine. It doesn't make you inadmissible, and then USCIS will reinstate your status.
Gotcha. Now, Avi, what's your advice for your clients and others who have not been targeted yet, but they are international students? They maybe been active on Palestine on social media, so they're a little worried about what might be coming, but nothing bad has happened to them yet. Should they just hang tight? Are there any preparations to make in advance to try to ward something like this from happening off?
Yeah, I think number one is stop working because I think a lot of F1 students have been getting away with unauthorized employment.
Hmm.
But I'm noticing more and more that it's not, like it's definitely being focused on. It's not going to be let slide anymore. The other really important advice is the school's code of conduct is really important. So what we've noticed is a lot of CVIS, so ICE is paying attention to your particular school's code of conduct. And if you violate it, they're using that as the basis to terminate your CVIS. So that big handbook that you may receive from your school when you enrolled, I think now's the time to make sure you go through it, stay informed. understand your school's disciplinary procedures, because if you are disciplined by your university, ICE is using that to terminate your CVIS.
And that begs the question, Afi, and we've struggled with this as well at CARE, is, for those students who want to be active, who see a genocide unfolding and want to say something about it and do something about it, should they just, be quiet and let U.S. citizens take the lead in protesting? Should they find other ways to be an activist? What kind of advice are you giving to people about, if they're an international student, whether or not they just need to step away from activism and wait for all this to blow over, or whether or not there is a safe way to be an activist, but hopefully not be targeted by the government?
Yeah, I honestly comes down to your appetite for risk, because I think let's start with number one, which is the foundation, which is whether you're an F1 student or not, you have the right to peaceably assemble. You have the right to free speech. Those are the cornerstones of this Constitution, and you, as an F1 student, have them. That being said, the current administration is kind of manipulating certain immigration laws to use protests supporting, what they believe to be terrorist organizations to revoke visas. It's a reality. It's happening. Are you willing to risk that possibility with exercising your right to free speech? And I think that's going to be an individual analysis for each person. People ask me, Afia, what do you advise? My job as an attorney is to tell you what your rights are and what the risks are. And ultimately, each person, Edward, is going to have to make that decision.
Absolutely. And I think, we've spoken to many students in CARE, and we hate to say it, but the advice we've generally been given is, if you can step back and let American citizens take the lead in the protests and the activism, for now, that's the safest thing for you. Because if you're not in the country, you can't finish your education, you can't contribute to the debate, the political debate later on. And so, if possible, we're suggesting that people exercise, caution in what they're doing in terms of activism. And maybe, hopefully, God willing, there will be a favorable court ruling in favor of a Mahmoud Khalil or Ramesa Öztürk that becomes the national precedent, that immigrants do have the right to free speech. They do have the right to write an editorial, to engage in a peaceful protest, and they cannot be deported or arrested or detained for only that reason. But that is still very much under a debate in the courts of law right now. Avia, what are the other potential threats that could exist to a student here on a visa? Is that it? Just the cancellation of CVIS? Is there anything else they need to worry about?
Even if, let's say, your status is terminated and then you reinstate it, the risk also is a bit long term, because when you, let's say, apply for a green card in the future, you do have to disclose that on any future application. So want to advise everyone not to try to hide it or pretend like it doesn't exist. So I think it's important to note that there may be a long-term residual effect. If you had something terminated or visa was revoked, those questions are always on every immigration application.
Absolutely. What about, Afi, this push from the Trump administration telling people to self-deport? That is just to voluntarily leave, don't fight back. And I guess they're saying this would reserve your option to potentially request to come back later, as opposed to being deported and then potentially not having the option to even try to come back. What's your make of that push from the administration, whether or not anyone should take them up on that offer, if they have been dead to rights, caught convicted of committing some sort of misdemeanor crime? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I heard today that they're going to be finding some bizarre, it's like $998 a day, um, if they stay before self-deporting. I wouldn't advise anyone to self-deport without consulting an immigration attorney, because um, voluntarily leaving the United States can trigger what we call certain bars for reentry. So even if you're not deported, even if you're leaving on your own volition, there are bars for reentry. For example, Edward, if you are in the United States for 180 days out of status and you leave the US, you're subject to a 3-year bar. And this is statutory. So this isn't something that the Trump administration can just like wave and say it's okay, especially because they're only in office, inshallah, for another 3 years. So let's say you want to come back in 4 years, and the next president is like, hey, no, the INA, the actual statute says you're barred. What is the Trump administration going to do then? So I don't advise it without speaking to an attorney.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Avi, it looks like we're getting some questions in the chat. I don't know if you see anything there that you want to maybe take from your audience that might have specific questions that you want to take. I mean, I think from my perspective, the key thing that students, really been concerned about is what do I do now if something bad has not happened yet? Once something bad happens, what do I do? And what do I do if I can't afford an immigration attorney, right? What if I can't pay an attorney? Who can I turn to? What do I do in that case? It's something I can handle by myself. That's another concern that I think some people have. A lot of these, college kids, obviously, they come here to go to school. They're not coming here with a large income behind them. They're coming here to get an education and then build up their income. So, any thoughts you have on that for, students who may not have the financial wherewithal to hire an attorney, any avenues for them? And of course, if you see any questions in the chat that you want to take.
Yeah, I think I saw one question repeat and I'll get to it, but your DSO is a free resource. Your school is a free resource. And I think for the most part, I know we can exclude some, I think for the most part, universities want you, they want your money, they want you in their school. And so they're willing for the most part to be helpful. Your DSO should be familiar with the SEVIS system and how it works and what timelines you need to be mindful of. So really leveraging that resource, but also following organizations like Care National, Boundless Immigration, Immigrant Legal Resource Center. So there's a lot of really good immigrant advocate organizations that are putting out informative, reliable information. USCIS.gov is really helpful. Like if you want to file a reinstatement or you want to file for your OPT extension, it'll tell you what form to file and it'll tell you the information you need to put in it. So there's a lot of resources out there for people who can't afford an attorney, especially students who aren't able to work, which makes no sense that we don't allow our students to work. But there are a lot of resources. So one of the questions I keep seeing is what is the most common reason for a SEVIS termination? Um, I would say just anecdotally, a really common reason is an encounter with police. So if you are arrested for any reason, and a common one that I've noticed that is inadvertent, often inadvertent, is a domestic violence call of any kind and any type of moving violation or traffic violation that's is aggravated. So, for example, if you are driving too fast, you can get a reckless driving charge. Any DUI, I know in a lot of states a DUI won't even lead to any type of jail time, and you just pay a fine. But in the immigration context, it has very severe consequences. Another one I've been noticing is unauthorized employment. So I mentioned this at the beginning, that for many years, it's been, very common for F1 students to be Uber drivers or, Lyft drivers or doing DoorDash. And unfortunately, I've been noticing those particular jobs are being targeted. And so just really advising everyone to be careful and hopefully, inshallah, we as a community can set up systems that support F1 students so that they don't have to do that. So that's really what I've been
And
noticing.
inshallah, inshallah. Now, I think, what about students who, again, have not been targeted yet, and they want to travel back home for the summer? School's out, they want to go see their family. They maybe, I don't know, have an internship or something, a fellowship overseas. What are the risks involved in traveling right now? Are they safe to travel, not safe to travel? What precautions should they take if they need to travel? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, my advice to my clients is no travel.
No travel.
You're not allowed to travel.
Yeah,
Unless it's an emergency. I'm strongly advising all of my clients against travel. This is particularly for people who, this is very common. You came on a tourist visa and you change to an F1, you don't have a visa. And, I don't know how much more to stress this. You change your status in the US, that is not a visa. That is your authorization to be in the US in that status. It is not authorization to travel in and out. So if you change your status here and then you say, Afia, I want to travel, I want to go back home, well, you realize you're losing your F1 status. You realize you have to apply for an F1 at the embassy abroad anew. So the State Department abroad is not necessarily going to honor the fact that the Department of Homeland Security gave you that F1 status. And so now more than ever, do not travel if you did a change of status. If you already have an F1 visa, I still don't advise travel because of everything we're seeing happening at the border.
Yeah, there's great risk that, if the administration is truly scouring social media and they find something that you posted in support of Palestinian human rights they don't like, and you're overseas, and when you come back, they don't let you come in. And my understanding, Afi, is that, if you are coming into the country as a student on a visa, you do not have a guaranteed right into the country, even with that visa, the way, for example, obviously a citizen would have, and even a lawful permanent resident might have. You're a student here on a visa, you don't have that same guaranteed right to get in the country if they find some reason to keep you out. Is that right? What are the protections a person has when they're coming back into the country if they're just on a visa?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when you're on a non-immigrant visa, which is a temporary visa, you really have no right to enter the United States. It's a privilege that the country can take away from you at the border. And I've seen time and time again that a CBP officer will see some type of post or some type of activity on someone's cell phone, and all it takes is a strike of a pen on the visa saying revoked. CBP has that authority, and unfortunately that's going to have, like I said, going to have lasting impact on your ability to reapply for an F1 visa. So again, it's not worth the risk. I mean, you don't know who you're going to encounter at the airport, and you don't know what type of activity you may have been engaged in on your social media. When everything happened initially in October, almost 2 years ago, um, many of us don't remember what we were liking and clicking on and commenting on. And so I just don't see the risk worth it.
And one question in the chat is, what about traveling domestically? Obviously, when you're traveling domestically, you're not having to deal with Customs and Border Patrol, but you are in the airport. You are, around federal officers potentially. What are your thoughts on domestic travel, not leaving the continents of the United States?
Yeah, I mean it's not as strict, but I still give a soft warning because, as many of you know, the Real ID requirements went into effect earlier this month. So you cannot just travel on a driver's license if it's not a Real ID anymore domestically. So let's say you're an F1 student, you don't have a Real ID, you have to show your passport. And now you're showing a TSA officer your foreign passport, and that particular TSA officer might be, he might be bored that day, he might be overly zealous, takes his job very seriously, and now he wants to see where's your visa and what's your status. So just because it's TSA versus CBP doesn't mean that TSA officer won't be asking you about your status. So if you're going to be traveling domestically, number one, make sure you have a Real ID to avoid having to show your foreign passport. Number two, if you have to show your foreign passport, make sure you have proof of maintaining your status. So what's that? That's your I-20. That's your transcripts even. I would even print out your class schedule. Have as much on hand so that you can show the officer.
Absolutely. And one of the questions in the chat is, well, what about U.S. citizens? And obviously, Afia, U.S. citizens are, even a new U.S. citizen are safe to travel. It's a whole nother process to try to target a U.S. citizen. And we haven't even seen this administration try to block U.S. citizens from coming back to the country. But for those who don't know, tell us a bit about that, Afia. The protections, obviously, that a U.S. citizen has, even if they're pulled aside for extra screening, that guaranteed right to come back to the country, if you want to share anything about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is you can't be denied entry into the US if you're a US citizen. You won't be detained without cause. Hopefully, inshallah, if you are, there's protections in place. You have a right to remain silent. You do have to answer, I like to say, like three important questions. Number one is your biographical data. So your name, your date of birth, where you were born, where you live. And then number two is where you traveled. So you do have to answer questions about where you traveled and why you traveled. Those are the really important questions you should be answering at the border. Other than that, you can exercise your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. As far as devices, people always ask me, as a US citizen, you can refuse to consent to the search of your phone or your laptop, understanding that you have a reduced sense of privacy. So whereas in normal circumstances, a police officer can't just take your phone, At the border, they can. So if you refuse to search of your phone, they can seize it from you. That's why for citizens or everyone, honestly, I advise to take a different phone than your day-to-day phone, or to do a factory reset of some kind. Definitely don't have Face ID to turn on your phone, because then they can just hold it up to your face. You want to put in a passcode, make it as difficult as possible for the government.
Yeah. And we see that happen often, especially to Muslim travelers, those traveling to Muslim countries like for Hajj or Umrah or things of that nature, getting pulled aside for the extensive secondary questioning and also the demand to look into someone's phone. And as you noted, Afia, U.S. citizens, you can decline. You can say no. They can still take the phone from you, maybe send it back to you later after they try to hack into it. But Afia, what if you're not a U.S. citizen? What if you're a green card holder? What if you're, again, someone coming here on a student visa? You do not have that same. Well, tell us, what are your thoughts on how they should react to a demand to access the phone if you're not a citizen, if you're at a level lower than a citizen? And does it change based on green card holder versus student here on a visa?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest difference is what can happen to you at the border. So for a US citizen, you're not going to be placed in immigration detention. For a green card holder, you can be. A green card holder cannot be denied entry. So just like a citizen, they have to be allowed into the US. However, the difference is if they are found to be deportable, for example, they're related to terrorist activities and they're found to be deportable under those particular regulations, they can be detained in immigration detention. But, they're going to go in front of an immigration judge and argue their case. And then a step lower would be visa holders. They can be denied entry. So you want to think of can't be denied entry, US citizen, green card holder, can be denied entry for just a visa holder, but then can be detained is a green card holder and a visa holder only. Now, we normally don't see visa holders being detained. We normally see that the visa is then revoked and they're turned back to their home country.
Right. So things for people to keep in mind if they are for some reason, if they don't take your advice not to travel and they travel overseas and they're coming back. Now, what about Afia, people who they live overseas and they are talented kids and they want to come here as a student and they're in the process of applying for that visa to come here as a student. Anything they need to know or be thinking about as they're in this very unique situation of trying to actually apply to come here on a student visa. I heard just today, I believe yesterday, the administration suspending visa interviews for students. They want to impose a social media review. Kids in that process right now who are not here yet and are applying for the visa, anything they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, even I think it was yesterday, the U.S. Embassy in India gave like this crazy stern warning about F1 students and how they're not going to be issuing as many as they used to. So I think the first thing to consider and really important is your financial situation, because the times of being able to work under the table are no more. So make sure that if you do want to go to school here, that you've arranged for your own financial support, and not only arrange for it, but you're able to document it, because the interviews are becoming increasingly difficult. There's two really important things that they're going to be asking for. Number one is your financial ability to support yourself and pay your tuition. And number two is your ties to your home country. We're going to see more and more rejections because you usually have people who are younger, people who are single, no families, and it's really hard for them to show ties. Usually, what I advise is have some type of demonstrated plan after you get your degree here. Put it in the form of an affidavit. So let's say you want to come here and get your bachelor's degree in data science. Lay out what you're going to do with that degree in your home country. Maybe have a job offer waiting for you when you go back. So that can demonstrate that, you only want to come here for a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Got a question here in the chat. If your F1 visa has expired, but you're still in school, do you advise going back to your home country now to renew it?
No,
Thoughts?
no,
Simple answer.
no.
Yeah,
No, it's a straight and hard
yeah,
no.
yeah. Gotcha. So instead, what should they be doing if they're in this situation?
You can't travel. It's, unfortunately, I have these conversations every day with my clients. It's just not the time.
Yeah.
It's just not the time. So, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's another thing that if you're thinking about applying for an F1 visa, something you want to consider is you probably won't see your family for some time. Um, if your F1 visa expires, but you're still in your program, you can stay here. And, I have so many clients who graduate with their bachelor's and they go to their master's and they get their PhD. And it's okay that your visa's expired. But the moment you go back, you're starting anew. And what we've noticed anecdotally is where a renewal used to be very easy, it is now being treated similar to an initial application.
Mm,
So expect that scrutiny, expect it to be difficult.
mm. Absolutely. Oh, well, Apia, I think we've hit most of the main questions from the chat. I think you've hit on the key things that people need to know. But anything else you think we missed that we need to share with students in particular?
I just, I guess two things I wanted to really hone in on is the student code of conduct, because I'm noticing in my practice more and more disciplinary actions on campus are resulting in CVIS terminations. The reason this is so important is think about how the current administration has created an environment where the university itself is almost in control of your ability to stay in the United States. And so it's really crucial when, if you're abroad and you're watching, or if you're here in the US, that when you're choosing a school, find other F1 students in that school and ask them questions. How supportive is your DSO? How supportive is your school? Do you know students who have been disciplined for participating in pro-Palestine protest? Do you have an active SJP on campus? How active is your MSA, your SJP, your pro-Palestine organizations? These are really important questions to ask when you're choosing a school, which weren't necessarily as important 5 years ago. So just wanted to really emphasize that, because not every school is created equal, and the schools are being handed more and more power when it comes to immigration.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's a very uncertain time that we are living through right now, not only for students, but for immigrants of other backgrounds and other legal statuses. Even lawful permanent residents have not been safe, as we've seen with Mahmoud Khalil. And so it's important for all of you to know that we have a new president. We have a new administration. We do not have a new U.S. Constitution. There are still guardrails to protect you. It just requires lawyers to do the good work to protect you. You've seen that with Mahmoud, with Ramesa, with Mohsen, and others who've been targeted. And obviously, there are hundreds more students who are in the crosshairs. So CARE and the Yunus law firm and many others are here to help you all, to support you, to give advice, answer your questions. And we look forward to continue to do that until we get over this and get through this uncertain, difficult time, inshallah. Afi, I'll leave it to you to close this out.
Yeah, inshallah. I always like to close on a positive note because I know there's so much fear out there, but
Yeah,
knowledge is power and it is the weapon against fear. And also just understanding that there's a greater being in control. That even though we live in uncertain times and we feel like things can be out of our control, understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control, and that inshallah, we've been through difficult times as Muslims in this country, as immigrants in this country, and together with knowledge, we can push forward, inshallah.
inshallah.
Um, and, reach out to Care National. Mashallah, they're doing amazing work. And they're a tremendous resource for the community. If you ever need anything, I know personally, anytime I've ever needed anything, they've been there for me and for my family and for my community. And I highly encourage you to support them and their efforts, to support Care National and your local care chapter in whatever work they're doing, whether it's your time, your money, your efforts, anything. Citizens always ask me, what can we do? And now's the time to be a true ally. That even if you're not an immigrant, number one, leverage your privilege as a US citizen in standing at the forefront of fighting for Palestine and putting your money and time with organizations like CARE to help so they can continue to assist and help immigrants, inshallah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Afia. Thank you all for joining us. And inshallah, we'll continue to be in dialogue and reach out to us if you need assistance, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. Assalamu
Wa
alaikum.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.